The Syrian Ministry of Defense has deployed additional reinforcements to northern Hama, intensifying operations against militant factions. Meanwhile, regional developments, including airstrikes, Iraqi solidarity with Syria, and Kuwaiti support for a two-state solution, are shaping the broader Middle East landscape. Welcome to our special coverage on Qnews, where we track the latest updates today in Syria and Gaza. The Syrian Ministry of Defense has announced the deployment of additional reinforcements to northern Hama. In a statement, the ministry confirmed that these reinforcements include personnel, heavy equipment, and rocket launchers. It also noted that Syrian and Russian warplanes are intensifying airstrikes on militant movements, resulting in dozens of casualties and injuries among the factions. Syrian state television also reported that over 1,000 militants were killed during the past 3 days of operations. The Syrian army has secured several key areas in northern Hama, including Qalat al-Madiq and Ma'ardis, after driving out armed groups, according to a military source quoted by state media. The source added that defensive lines in the region have been strengthened to prevent any militant breaches. Meanwhile, our correspondent reported the withdrawal of armed factions from the town of Halafaya, north of Hama, coinciding with the continued arrival of reinforcements to Syrian army positions on the city's outskirts. Iraqi President Abdul Latif Rashid has emphasized the significance of developments in Syria and their regional impact during a meeting with the National Security Advisor. He called on the international community to shoulder its responsibilities in supporting regional stability. In a phone call with his Syrian counterpart, Bassem Sabbagh, Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein reaffirmed Iraq's solidarity with Syria in its fight against armed factions. A new conflict has ignited in northern Syria, disrupting calm with escalating battles in Aleppo and Idlib.
A new conflict has erupted in northern Syria, breaking a prolonged period of relative calm. Armed factions launched a surprise offensive last Wednesday, targeting rural areas in Aleppo and Idlib, marking the first assault of its kind in 5 years. The Syrian army confirmed that elements of the armed groups managed to infiltrate significant areas in Aleppo's neighborhoods. However, the military highlighted that these factions failed to establish strongholds due to the army's continued targeted and intense strikes against them. In a statement, the Syrian army announced it's conducting a redeployment operation in Aleppo province to bolster its defense lines and counter the offensive. The army emphasized that the redeployment aims to secure positions until reinforcements arrive and can be distributed across the combat axis in preparation for a counteroffensive. The military further noted that fierce battles have taken place across a front exceeding 100 kilometers, with the army delivering concentrated strikes to halt the factions' advances. The operation successfully prevented the militants from solidifying their presence within Aleppo. Meanwhile, the Syrian Council of Ministers affirmed its efforts to create a supportive environment for the armed forces to achieve victory in Aleppo and Idlib. During a meeting to assess the evolving situation on the ground, the Council underscored the need of ministers to remain flexible and responsible in addressing the transitional circumstances, enabling state institutions to continue serving citizens effectively. The armed factions, on their part, claim to have made significant advances on both the Aleppo and Idlib fronts during their offensive. With the imminent arrival of substantial reinforcements for the Syrian army and reports of similar mobilizations by the armed factions, the conflict appears poised for escalation. The battles may soon extend beyond the Aleppo and Idlib fronts, signaling a potential broadening of hostilities across northern Syria.
For further analysis on the current situation in Syria, we're joined from Cairo by the journalist Muhammad Mustafa Abu Shama. Mr. Muhammad, welcome to Qnews. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me first start by asking you, what are the strategic objectives behind Syria's recent military reinforcements in the northern Hama countryside?
The artist, I would like to salute you and your dear viewers. Situations in Syria are escalating. And as probably the public opinion in the world have been surprised. Maybe the landscape in Lebanon that overwhelmed the ability of the public opinion internationally, even though the incidents are surprised. But they are classified in the USA that the terrorist group has succeeded to control the Aleppo. Naturally, that was controlled by parts of Idlib in the northern Syria. That would represent a great potential upon the stability in Syria. And it was some sort of a satisfaction to the division of powers. And as you know, that Syria has been divided in different portions and mostly controlled by the Syrian state as well as the Syrian army.
Yes, sir. Speaking of the Syrian army, in light of the recent Syrian military reinforcements and operation to retrieve back the areas, can you outline the key developments that is currently unfolding in northern Syria from a military perspective?
Can you repeat the question again? The guests are having a difficulty listening.
Yes, I would like for you to highlight the key military developments that's taking place on ground in northern Syria so that the Syrian army can retrieve back the areas taken by the armed groups.
Military development. Maybe with the Iranian-Russian movement in support in the Syrian army is generating a great and important step. And the communications by the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to the leaders of the region in supporting them and the stability of the Syrian state. Naturally, forces have precedence in the conflict in the combatant of the national army that received a support as a result of the continued conflict of more than 1 year that weakened largely the abilities of the Syrian army and their allies in the region, whether they are Iran and Hezbollah, that negatively affected the army to retaliate, to confront the aggression that recalled their withdrawal from the Aleppo, that form
now, sir, sorry for interrupting you, but given the recent military activity, looking ahead, do you foresee further escalation or possible de-escalation perhaps in the coming days in northern Syria?
It seems like that the tension in the Middle East hasn't been calmed down yet, and it is linked to the power conflict surrounding Syria. The matter is not just related internally in Syria, but the conflicted parties are getting support from outside, and the conflict is extended between the main two parties that are Iran and Israel, or it is a new page of the extended conflict between Israel and Iran that never stopped and would never stop. We have thought that truce in Lebanon would ease that conflict, but extended to another area, and there are different parties interested to ignite the conflict in different areas in Syria, and the dismantling Syria is an old goal that has been exposed since 2011, as known that the Arab saying that Syria was dismantled, and we see statements from the occupied, the Israeli occupation forces interested to transform Syria to a federal station. These are reflections into the nature of the beneficiary, and the igniting what's happening in Syria to continue. The escalation is a part of the regional war that is extending, and what is called it is just a redrawing the map of the Middle East. It is expected to be escalated at larger scale and in different parts in Syria according to the pace of the operation.
Taking into consideration the internal matters inside Syria, how do you view the long-term prospects for stability in Syria, considering the military, political, and humanitarian challenges the country faces?
Did not listen to the question very well.
Okay, let me repeat it once again. How do you view the long-term prospects for stability in Syria, considering the military, political, and humanitarian challenges the country faces?
In fact, humanitarian institutions are very bad, and naturally the deterioration is an extended matter due to the civil wars within Syria, as any area could be controlled by the militant group. Syria is suffering for years of that matter, and the horizon in general would be the regaining Syria to the Arab umbrella, and to shoulder the responsibility with regard to the humanitarian issue. But the internal issues are part of the results of what's happening in the region, and effectively that negatively affected the humanitarian issue, on top of which in the northern area that are the locations of the militant areas.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. Sorry for interrupting you due to shortage of time. That was the journalist Muhammad Mustafa Abu Shama. And now we move to the latest developments in Lebanon. Israeli airstrikes in northern Gaza have targeted a residential building in Tel Zatar, killing at least 40 Palestinians, including women and children, and leaving many trapped under the rubble. Over 100 fatalities were reported across Gaza in 24 hours, with multiple bombings destroying homes in Beit Lahia, Jabalia, and Qnews. Civilians waiting for aid were also targeted, further highlighting the worsening humanitarian crisis amid limited rescue efforts and severe destruction. A 15-year-old Palestinian child has been injured by Israeli occupation forces during a raid in Anabta, east of Tulkarm, in the occupied West Bank. The child sustained head injuries from live ammunition shrapnel and was treated by the Palestinian Red Crescent before being transferred to Thabit Hospital, where his condition is reported to be moderate. This incident underscores the ongoing violence during Israeli incursions into West Bank towns, which frequently harm civilians, including children. Kuwait's Emir Mishal al-Ahmad al-Jaber al-Sabah has announced support for Saudi efforts towards a two-state solution that came at the 45th Gulf Summit, where he praised Egypt and Qatar's role in Gaza ceasefire talks. Chairing the summit, he reaffirmed the Gulf Cooperation Council's commitment to a Palestinian state based on international frameworks, condemned Israeli actions in Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, and called for Gaza civilian protection. The summit addressed Gaza, Lebanon, Sudan, and Syria crises. The Gaza food crisis has worsened with escalating malnutrition, aid restrictions, and a looming humanitarian disaster. For further analysis on the current situation in Gaza, we're joined from Deir al-Balah by the director of the Palestinian NGOs network, Amjad al-Shawa. Mr. Amjad, welcome to Qnews. Thank you so much for joining us. So there have been reports of Israel's use of internationally banned weapons in Gaza. What can you tell us about these claims and their potential legal ramifications?
Greetings to you. The evidence proves the size of destruction used by the occupied forces and of already complained about this. This is in particular before the scenes of the bodies and the martyrs and the great destruction that took place in Gaza Strip by using such a very advanced bombs and the use of several arms that actually banned internationally to be used against the neighborhoods and the schools And this systematic aggression that lasted for more than 14 months, and in addition that the occupied forces used the starvation that led to the famine and the direct killing by the internationally banned weapons and through the means used in killing most of the Palestinian people.
Now, regarding the United Nations and international organizations, what role are they currently playing in supporting Gaza during this crisis?
I might link this answer to this question to the first one. The United Nations is trying to eliminate the mines that are located in different sectors in Gaza that pose a great risk upon the Palestinian people, and have requested to send the international committees to dismantle these missiles and explosives that are posing a great risk. But the main role of the United Nations regarding the humanitarian response, we've already listened to the Speaker of the UNRWA regarding the delivering the aids through the crossing Salem that pose a great risk in light of the control of the occupied forces. By hindering these aids, and therefore UNRWA and other United Nations organizations are playing a great role. But in light of what's been going on by the Israeli forces, even these organizations, they are targeting, as yesterday, the universal kitchen that's been suspended. So there is a great risk of the hindering the NGOs through the universal kitchen, and the agency, the children and education and health to provide the food aids throughout the world, but they all are threatened in light of the occupied forces targeting this organization and undermine their work in addition to the Palestinian NGOs.
Yes, sir, building on what you said in terms of the security, how can we eliminate the threat that is imposed on the safety and operations of relief teams on the ground in Gaza?
Demanded the United Nations international organization in light of this and a very complicated catastrophe made by the Israeli occupied by undermining the local and international organizations that make them incapable of fulfilling their roles. There are tens of times of attempts made a representative of the UN agency to enter the notion of the Gaza Strip that is besieged for more than 50 days, and most of their deeds were failed. Two-thirds of these attempts were failed. In addition, there are restraints of their mobilizations into Gaza.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. Sorry for interrupting you due to the shortage of time. That was the director of the Palestinian NGOs Network, Amjad Al-Shawa.